Hey guys, what's up? So Dune by Frank Herbert. It was a great book. It was a great series by Frank Herbert when, he did about there was several books in the series, like 10 of them or something all overall, but it was what might not have been exactly 10, but it was around that. It was a lot. And so Dune, what's interesting about Dune is it's not just like a science fiction story, it's sort of like a philosophy book about ideas and philosophy and about like real systems and like governments and things that are happening right now, but it's sort of like put into a science fiction story. And what's interesting is that this science fiction story takes place 10,000 years in the future, right? And the thing about that is people are exactly the same. No one's different. And I believe that. I'm pretty sure that 10,000 years in the future, people are going to be maybe not exactly the same, but very, very, very similar. Like, I think 10,000 years in the past, people were generally like people are today. People just don't change, unless there's like a different kind of person or a new species of people all of a sudden that comes out of nowhere. But this is interesting because it's just higher technology, things are different, but people are the same, systems are the same, what people want are the same, what people are trying to do is the same. So what's interesting is that, like, I don't know if I'm positive that he meant this as a philosophical statement, the whole story. And I'm generally going to talk about the first book because the other books are just sequels, but everyone knows the first book. I tried reading the half of the second book and it was like, I couldn't, it was very political and it was all about like what people were thinking and, what they were doing and what was politically right to do and what was wrong to do. So it was all about that. And it didn't really, I just felt like it was just all about that. But the first book is really, really interesting. So if you've read, Dune, you know the story. So Dune is about the world 10,000 years in the future. And generally, like, the main part of Dune is this substance called the spice. And the spice is, it adds life, it expands consciousness. So basically, you can live forever. Well, not forever, but it depends. Like there are beings that are living a very, very, very long time, but it'll expand your life. And also, it'll extend your consciousness. Like they use it to see into the future and things like that. But the thing is about the spice is that once you use the spice, once you take the spice, you can't stop taking it. Like there's just no way you won't survive if you stop taking the spice, right? The spice will just kill whoever stops taking it or damage them a lot. So yeah, the spice adds life and expands consciousness, but also makes you completely dependent on it. You cannot stop taking spice. And what's interesting, it's a story about someone. It's about the main character is Paul Atreides, who's like he's actually not supposed to be who he is. It gets complicated. His mother was a Bene Gesserit witch, and they weren't allowed to have male children or something like that. And they were only allowed to like have they were basically trying to engineer the perfect person, and they were trying to engineer, like, basically they were only allowed to have female children. And when you have children, around the Bene Gesserit, and you weren't allowed to have like children from love. You were allowed only to have children, who were, designed to be within the interests of these Bene Gesserit witches. So they tell you what kind of children you can have, what kind you can't have, because they're trying to genetically design this super being or something for some reason. And it's just interesting that it's all, and the story is that she went ahead and had her child out of love, not out of some engineering plan, right? And what happened was this child became like super powerful. The story is about the main character, Paul Atreides, becoming super powerful. He was the prince of he was the prince of one of the planets, and his father was the ruler of the planet or something like that. But he was like the head of the planet, and he was and the main character was his son, and they go basically to this planet where the spice is mined and stuff like that. So what's interesting about the spice is at some point in the story, they realize that the spice is essential to not only like people staying alive, but also to space travel. They would travel through folding space, and it was just some new concept. I like that he did it that way. He created a new concept of science that we really don't understand too much, like folding space. Well, what does that mean? They kind of were able to fold space and get to where they were going. And I like that they did that because it's like there's just too many like science fiction stories about the future where they're saying where they're like they just like create scientific advancements in ways that we can understand, right? But this sort of like folding space was a scientific way to travel through space that we really don't understand because we don't have any technology that's even close to, folding space, which is cool because I would say like, in 10,000 years in the future, technology is going to be to the point where we don't really understand from where we are now. We wouldn't just be able to understand the technology. We would have to kind of get a primer. We kind of would have to like learn about, okay, this went to that, this changed to that, this changed to that, and that other thing. And then they decided they found that, So what's interesting about all of these stories and stuff, there's only some main planets, and all of these planets have political systems, and sometimes they're at war with each other, and sometimes they're cooperating with each other for financial or military gains or strategic gains, So what's really interesting about this spice thing is it's mined in this desert planet. Like the whole planet is just made of desert. And what's interesting about it is that at some point in the story, they decide, well, the main character, Paul Atreides, the one that, the prince of the place that his mother had him out of love and everything. So he realizes that in order to take power, he tried to take, he landed on this like desert planet and he wanted to take power. And he realized that if they stopped spice production, they would actually be the most powerful force in the universe. Because whoever controls the spice basically controls the universe because it's so necessary for everything. And they decided, well, if we could just like stop spice production, then all of these other planets would have to do whatever whatever we want them to do because we control the spice. They're not going to get any spice if we have it all, right? So what's interesting about that is, and what's so similar about that whole concept and modern day the world is the spice is a lot like, you could say it's a lot like a lot of different things, but it's also a lot very, very, very like oil, right? It's also mined in desert conditions, and also it's necessary for any kind of travel, like not even space travel, but we don't travel through space a lot, but we do travel in cars, airplanes, all that. It's necessary for travel, oil. And basically, if someone just stopped oil production, it wouldn't just end any kind of travel. Nothing would be able to be manufactured. Food couldn't get distributed. Nothing could, things couldn't get produced because machines and factories and all kinds of everything with a motor has oil or gasoline or petrol or diesel or something that's oil based, So that's the thing about this spice, is that it's just this one thing that if you just stop its production, it will collapse the whole universe. Like people wouldn't be able to get it. People would die from lack of being able to take more spice. No one will be able to travel anywhere because you need the spice to travel. Everyone, so no one will be able to travel, no one will be able to be alive at this point. It's the same thing as oil, basically, right? Where if someone just is able to stop oil production or control oil production, it would basically, they would run the whole world, because they would be able to either turn everything on or turn everything off. So whoever runs the oil production rules the world, you know? Right now, it's not like that, because there's a lot of different people who are involved in oil production, and it's all like, you know, it's all kind of like meshed together. Like you can't really stop oil production, you know, because the powers that be would it's in everyone's interest on this planet for oil to be produced, because if you want to drive your car, take an airplane somewhere, you know, ride a bus or train, you would have to have oil. If you need anything manufactured, oil. Something that generates a motor, the engine that generates light or electricity, oil also, you know? So it's just like, you wouldn't actually be able to do that in our world, but it's just so closely put together. It's just so closely like linked that I know that you know, Frank Herbert kind of meant that in a little bit of a way, that oil was like the spice, but it's different. One is a substance that people would ingest, and then another one would be like something that every single motor needs to run. And the thing is about this situation is this spice was on one planet. So it was easy to sort of like, it was kind of like easy to control it, because it was just on this one planet, and it was very, very hard to mine. Where oil, it's like, you know, there's just like, everyone is interested in oil being produced, and there's really no way to stop oil production. There's just no way to do it. You know, it doesn't, you can't just have like one force in the world to say, hey, we're going to stop oil production. You know, everyone's going to be like, no, you can't stop oil production, because like, you know, like you can't stop oil production. People will just, you know, it would be like a whole war, you know, from people that are trying to stop oil production. The thing is that, like, if they stop oil production, they wouldn't be able to use oil either. But the thing about this idea of Dune and how that spice was mined was that it was mined on a desert planet, on Arrakis, on a desert planet, which was full of these worms, giant, 100-meter long, big, giant worms that traveled under the sand of the planet. There was no water. There was very, very little water. There was no rain. It was just a desert planet. So, so people were able to just kind of live on that planet, and whoever would try to mine the spice would come down, and they would just attack the spice mining things. They started kind of like being able to ride these worms. And these worms were like hugely, really, really powerful, because the worms would, you know, they would just like ride these giant worms and then shoot down all of these spice miners. And because it was difficult to do, you'd have to land a miner, and the mining machine would have to like, would have to like stand there for as long as it could, mining spice from the planet, until the worm came, and they would have to like take whatever was mined and leave. So it was difficult to do. You needed kind of like to travel to the planet. And what they did was they created enough of a force, a military force, because there was a lot of people living on that planet already. They just used them all as a military force to just destroy these spice miners. And then basically it was just like, they were just like, hey, we control the spice. We get to call the shots. You know, it's really, really, really interesting that, you know, they're like, we control the spice, we get to call the shots. And it's really, really similar to like oil. Like, you know, anyone that is so essential, anyone that is, you know, like, anyone that controls anything so essential like spice or like oil, they basically call the shots, because they do. But the difference is with oil, and which is, I think, what the story was about at some level. I think they also wanted to make it about a lot of different things, politics. They wanted to make a cool science fiction story, like some of these planets were evil and some of them were good. But I really do think that they were talking about oil or something like it. I don't think they were talking about oil directly in the book, but they made this spice very, very, very similar to modern oil. The difference is that they were able to stop spice production and control it. And oil production really cannot be controlled. But if someone was able to stop oil production or was able to control oil, that person would be completely powerful, right? If it was a government or like a military faction or something that were controlling all the oil, they would be the most powerful military in the world because they control the oil. You cannot have a military without oil. And if someone controlled the oil and took all of the oil for themselves, they would be powerful because they would say, we decide who gets oil and who doesn't. It's sort of like that. And what's interesting also is that it's also like water. Like whoever controls water also controls, basically, they're really also super powerful because if someone can say, look, we decide who gets water and who doesn't, where the water goes and where it doesn't, they would become super powerful. Right now, though, I mean, the story was 10,000 years in the future, and it's real similar to the way things are now. But right now, no one's really stopping oil production. No one's limiting water production or anything like that. But if someone did, they would be the most powerful faction in the world. If someone could successfully say, well, we control all of the oil, right? Or we control all of the water. The thing about water is that it's really hard to control. It's naturally, it just comes up everywhere from natural springs, rivers. You can distill it from ocean water. It comes from the sky, it rains, So you can't really do anything with water. But with oil, and I also think it's really interesting, like I think he kind of like, put up a red flag at this point, like when he wrote this story and the way that spice can affect, this whole spice analogy can affect the way our planet or our civilization is run. And he said this: if there's this one all-powerful thing that everybody needs, right? And one person or one kind of force or military force or whatever was able to control it, they would control the world. And it's sort of like a warning to people that not to let that happen. Like, don't let one person control all the oil because they will tell everyone, what to do because they will be more powerful than anyone can do. It's just like, I don't know if you've ever seen a transit strike where like people were like trains and buses wouldn't run because they were on strike. It's the same thing with strikes. It could be a transit strike. It could be any kind of strike. There was an airplane pilot strike. No one would be able to fly on an airplane, right? Transit strike, nobody could use a train or a bus. Everyone would have to use cars. And in cities, cars are super saturated, which means like there's already too many cars and there's too much traffic and you can't get around. And it's really it's interesting that it was sort of like whoever can strike, like, whoever can like control a necessary resource or element or something that's so necessary that you cannot function without it. Like if someone all of a sudden controlled all of the cell phone towers or the cell phone signals or whatever and turn them off, it's like no one will be able to like talk to anyone else. Like that, you know, there'd be no cell phones would be down. Like no one would be able to communicate. Nothing would be done. Like everyone relies on cell phones to such an extent. So it's really, really interesting. And I think that what this story is saying is to not let one person or one faction control something vital. That whenever there's something vital, it has to be like, it sort of has to be like in everyone's control. Because whoever controls a vital thing has all the power. You know, basically when there's a strike, they usually get what they want. You know, especially if there's a transit strike or like when there's trains or no buses in a city, and they're on strike and there's like no buses or trains for a week, and no one can get around and no one can get, you know, to and from work, or nothing is done. Like nothing is done. Like no one can do anything. You know, people try to take cars and stuff, but if they can, you know, if they have a car, like in cities, people don't have cars. Taxis are like, if you're in the city, you can use a taxi. Out of the city, I don't know. And Uber, yeah, you can get an Uber into the city. It'll cost you $50, right? You know, so basically, whoever strikes, they usually get what they want. You know, they'll say, okay, we're not gonna run the trains anymore until we get what we want. We want our $10 raise. You know, we want $10 more raise or whatever per hour or whatever it is, right? You know, and they get it because there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. They will just strike, and that's what happened with. They found like this Paul Atreides, this dude who was like, I mean, he's also like a super being and stuff like that. But he found like the thing that one thing that would basically make him a super powerful force by controlling something essential, by controlling spice, by controlling something essential. Now, like, he's a super powerful like being because of it. And I do think Frank Herbert meant that as an interesting story and analogy. And it doesn't have to be oil. It could be anything. It could be like people striking, or, you know, like a transit strike. It could be something that's really, really essential that we all rely on. And whoever controls it, basically they get whatever they want because they control it. They can say, well, we're not going to produce any more oil. And like people, for some time, people would be able to like still use oil, whatever's been like mined. But if someone like was able to stop all oil mining, we would actually run out of oil pretty fast. Whatever has already been mined, we'd use it up, and that would be it. And all the machines would go down, and you know, like cars wouldn't work, factories wouldn't work, nothing would be able to get produced. And everything would go down. Trains would not work. Buses, nothing would work, you know? So, and so I guess if you want to look at it in a positive way, that it kind of was a warning, like, you know, be careful of these essential things, because without them, like nothing would run without these essential things. And if someone controlled these essential things, they wouldn't have to be that powerful. But if they were able to control this one thing that everyone relies on, they would be able to call the shots. They would run the whole world, and whatever they wanted, they would have to get, because no one would have a choice. So let me know if you guys like the video, and this is my philosophy and Dune video. So thanks for watching for this far. I know you guys like my philosophy videos because I see the analytics. But okay, but thanks a lot, guys. Comment below if you want to say something about the video, and yeah, and like and subscribe and share and all that. So take care. Hope you enjoyed the video, and yeah, take care. Have a great day. Later.